Hello, and welcome to the Action Popcast with me, Nick, Action Pop Dad, and my co-host, KymGonic.
Hey!
Today, we will be taking a deep dive into the sewers of New York, where we will be pitting the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies against the 2014 to 2016 Michael Bay movies. So grab your bow staff, get your size, your nunchucks, and sharpen your katanas while we get into all things T.U.R.T.L.E Power. Hello, I hope everyone is well. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of the Action Popcast. My name is Nick, or APD, and my co-host is KymGonic. Kim, hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. So are you ready to dive into all things T.U.R.T.L.E Power?
I think so. I think I'm ready.
You think so? Yeah, it's been a long road to get here, but we finally made it. And I just want to say, for anyone listening to this, we don't profess to be experts on the Turtles franchise. We are just purely fans. We actually got around 30 pages of research for this, which was only scratching the surface. But for the sake of a podcast this length, we've had to really skim down. So if we miss any facts, any details that you know, chances are we've probably got it in our research notes, we've read it, but we've just really had to cut things down because the first film alone could probably fill out a couple of our podcasts, and we've got to go over 5 movies tonight. The whole point of this podcast is we just want to talk about the heyday of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990s films versus the Michael Bay films from 2014 and 2016. We're going to go over the basic facts and figures of the films, give you a little rundown of what the films are about. We're going to discuss what we did and didn't like. And at the end, me and Kim, we haven't spoken to each other about this, but we are going to pick what our favorite movie is out of all 5 films. So it'll be interesting to see what summary we both come to and what film we pick. So, Kim, with all that said, are you ready, mate?
I'm ready. Let's go.
You're ready. So I feel it is probably worth giving a brief history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And by brief, I do mean brief because it is very expansive. But basically, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it all started from, there was a comic book artist called Kevin Eastman, and he drew a turtle basically wearing a bandana with nunchucks to show his fellow comic book artist friend, T.U.R.T.L.E. They did this for a laugh. There was a little bit of one-upmanship, and from that, they developed the idea of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They went on in 1984 to start their own comic book company, Mirage Comics, and they self-released their own book, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they did 3,000 copies. This was self-financed. I mean, I think they had to beg, borrow, and steal to get the money together, but they printed 3,000 copies, and it sold out, much to their surprise. The first ever comic they did was in black and white, and as I say, it did sell out within a few weeks. An interesting thing about this is there are certain crossovers unofficially with the Daredevil franchise. It was sort of a thing that Kevin Eastman and T.U.R.T.L.E, when they came up with the story, so in the Daredevil comics, you get Matt Murdock, who gets hit in the face with this toxic goo, goes blind, develops all the powers of Daredevil. But Kevin Eastman and T.U.R.T.L.E, what they wanted to do, as I say, all unofficially for copyright reasons, they wanted to sort of show what was happening to the side, what happened. So in their heads, although not officially, the goo that hit Matt Murdock went down in the sewers, smashed a turtle bowl out of some kid's hands, landed on the turtles, landed on the rat that became Splinter, who trained them, and they mutated into, I would like to say, anthropomorphic, but I'm going to use humanoid for this because, as Kim knows from when we were talking about this, I really struggle with that word. So they mutated into the Ninja Turtles. They were trained by their master Splinter, who had learned the way of the ninja from his master, who happened to be murdered along basically by the Shredder. And he trained these guys up to seek vengeance. There are some certain crossovers there. I mean, if you want to look at it, the Turtles master was called Splinter, Daredevil's was called Stick, and you've got the Turtles fight the Foot Clan, and of course Daredevil fought their hand. So there are these little crossovers there. And in 1987, they basically leased the rights of this to the Playmates company, who came up with a line of toys, which I myself collect. And much like Masters of the Universe, they decided that they needed something to promote this. So they came up with, they got Fred Wolf, the Fred Wolf production company, to make 5 episodes of the Turtles to help promote this, which later went on for, I believe, 10 seasons. And yeah, in 1990, the first feature film of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was released. So there you go. That is very brief. We have just skimmed over the basic facts of that. There is a lot missed there. And if there's any errors, I do apologize, but it's an awful lot to remember. So forgive me for doing all the talking. Kim is going to come in a minute, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990. It was initially released on March the 30th, 1990, and it had a really small budget of $13.5 million. And from that $13.5 million, they actually managed at the box office to take $202 million. In 1990, that was a colossal success. No major companies were really interested. I mean, it may have been because of the failure of films like Masters of the Universe and even films like Howard the Duck. As I say, no major companies. Disney weren't interested, Columbia weren't interested, MGM, Paramount. So many, basically, they didn't want to take the gamble. They thought that it was a bit of a tainted theme, the comic book films. So eventually it was picked up by a company called Golden Harvest, who were sort of famous for releasing Bruce Lee's films, and later on Jackie Chan movies. And then it went on to be distributed by New Line Cinema. Sorry, there, a little bit of a pause. So much information to get out. The gamble did pay off, though, because it actually turned out to be one of the largest grossing films of its time, and it wasn't beaten until 1999 when the Blair Witch Project came out. So it was absolutely blooming brilliant what it achieved. It was directed by an Irish chap called Steve Barron. His previous sort of work, he'd worked on a lot of music videos. One example of that was Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. A film credit of his, we're not going into the full array of what he's done, but he did work on the film Coneheads, which was taken from the Saturday Night Live sketch of the Coneheads. An interesting link here, he did actually work on Jim Henson's The Storyteller. And what I would say, if you want to know more about The Storyteller, it's worth checking out the Dreamland podcast by Retroblasting, because they've recently just done an amazing podcast all about this. And this leads to the point that Jim Henson's Creature Shop, they ended up doing the special effects for this movie, all the special and practical effects, the puppets. And sadly, this was the last movie that Jim Henson worked on before his death. So with all that said, I'm going to shut up now. And before we get into a deeper dive and discussion of these films, Kim, would you like to give a little rundown on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze? Kim, I'm just going to say I can't hear you currently.
I will do my best.
Okay, sorry, Kim was just muted there. So Kim, yeah, if you just want to run down the facts. As I say, we're just going to run down the basic facts of each film before we get into having a broader discussion, just to fill anyone in who may have been hiding in a sewer for the last 30 plus years. So Kim, take it away.
So Secret of the Ooze was released the 22nd of March 1991, just a year later after the original. Budget was about $25 million at the time. Box office, it did hit 78.7 million, which was actually down from the original movie. Again, it was produced by Golden Harvest, distributed by New Line Cinema, but it was in fact internationally distributed by 20th Century Fox. Directed by Michael Pressman, previous work like Boulevard Nights, which is a neo-noir crime film, and TV series Picket Fences. Again, we were lucky enough to have Jim Henson's Creature Workshop to do the practical effects on this. However, because Jim Henson had sadly passed, it was taken over by his son, Brian Henson, who then took on the lead. But you could definitely tell that that sort of style and the way that the practical effects had been sort of ingrained into his son, so you didn't really see too much of a difference.
Yeah, but you could certainly see that it was Jim Henson's work. I mean, you've only got to look at films like The Labyrinth and, as I say, The Storyteller to see that particular style, haven't you?
100%.
So yeah. And then, of course, the next film in the series, which proved to be a little bit of a failure, unfortunately, was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Some people often mistakenly call it Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Turtles in Time, but that's not how it was actually released. I believe people get that confused with the video game. It was released on the 19th of March, 1993. Unlike Turtles 2, which came out barely a year after the first movie, this film came out 2 years later. It was down on the budget. They only actually spent 21 million on it, and a lot of the reason why they switched the company who did the special effects and the suits for this is believed to be down to that. They were actually handled by a company called the All Effects Company. It's not that I don't think they did a bad job. It's just that it wasn't what we were used to. And of course, with Jim Henson working on the last two films, it was the continuity seemed to shift a little bit there. Same production company as the first two films. It was directed by a chap called Stephen Gillard. He also actually wrote this as well. I mean, he'd had previous credits for working on TV shows such as The Outer Limits, 90210, Charmed, One Tree Hill. And the one film credit, which I'm going to mention here, was Rocket Man in 1997. And that was more of a comic sci-fi film. So, not to waffle and spit facts at you completely, before we go into the other films in the series, let's jump a bit back to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 and have a little bit of a discussion about what it was we did and didn't like. So, Kim, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990. What are your thoughts on that, dude?
Do you know what? It was definitely like sort of a trip down memory lane for me, because obviously I was born the year that it came out.
Oh, stop showing off. Don't show off how young you are, mate.
Sorry.
Come on. I mean, that's just...
I have to admit, because I have an older brother who was in the 80s, the actual first introduction I got to the Turtles was actually the cartoon, wasn't actually the movie.
Okay.
Was more the cartoon. But obviously, I still love the movie. I just love the idea of having turtles that were ninjas. Because I wasn't a girly girl particularly, and having a brother, you sort of just watch all sort of similar things. But I just thought it was cool. I think I loved the film because the people were in the suits and stuff, but you were connecting with the character. You weren't really looking at it as people in suits, you know?
I certainly think that the fact they used practical effects for this film, I mean, for me, I always prefer practical effects over CGI. And that's not a clue for later on, because we will be going into the Michael Bay films. But when I watch the films, that you really do feel like the turtles are alive in it. I mean, everything about them, their movement, the way the faces are, it's so convincing. Yeah, there's telltale signs if you want to look close. You can see their eye holes under the bandana if you really want to stare. And there is one scene in the film that's famously memed where Donatello laughs, and you can actually see the stunt performer's teeth shining through. I mean, I really like this film. I mean, all credit here to IMDb, just to give people who haven't seen the film. Do you want to give a quick summary of what the plot of the film is before we go any further in the discussion?
Sure. Just like a brief storyline. Through contact with mysterious ooze, 4 turtles in the sewers of New York mutate into intelligent, pizza-loving humanoids and are mentored in the art of ninja combat by the wise rat, Splinter. When the evil Shredder attempts to take over the world, the turtles set out to stop him.
Yeah, and that's the really cool thing here. And I think one of the things I really like about this film, I mean, it's only been recently, I must admit, it's only been recently that I've really looked into and read the original Eastman and Laird comic. Because growing up, my first introduction to the Turtles was the Fred Wolf cartoon. I mean, I wasn't really aware of it till 1990. I mean, in 1990, I was 4, coming up 5 years old. And people talk about phenomenons and what have you, but literally the Turtles, it was absolutely massive, dude. I can remember my mum had to queue at a Tesco's shop for like 2 or 3 hours to get me one of the Turtles toys. It was that mad. The fuss was crazy. I mean, the thing I like about this film here, and one of the reasons I think it was so successful personally, was it's a good mixture of the Eastman and Laird comic and the Fred Wolf cartoon. And I think that's one of the reasons why it probably did as well as it did, because it appealed to children as well as adults. It later went on to be criticized for the violence, but I don't actually think that I mean, looking back now, I mean, obviously films have changed. Violence has amped up in films, hasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
the violence of the 90s versus the violence of a modern day film, I don't think it's anything like as bad. But I personally thought the story was brilliant. I mean, when you look at the story, it's such a simple, straightforward story, but it works. You've got the four brothers. I mean, differing from the comic book. I mean, the Turtles and Shredder don't actually know who each other really are till later on. But the long and short of it is, the Foot want to silence April O'Neil for investigating them. Raphael gets involved. April basically passes out. She discovers who the Turtles are, and then you go on this wild ride leading to talking about the violence to a fight in April O'Neil's apartment where Raphael gets the absolute crap kicked out of him and ends up in a coma. And then they end up back at April's place. Splinter gets kidnapped because April's boss in this film, I mean, April was played by an actress called Judith Hoag, I do believe. Her boss's son, he's this guy called Danny. He's a little bit of a whiny character in it. He's basically working for the Foot, and he lets them know. And yeah, so Splinter gets kidnapped, and then it's basically Danny has a crisis of confidence, speaks to Splinter. Splinter, at one point when they're at the farmhouse, sort of astro projects to the Turtles, and they see him sort of beaming up from a fire. And it's the final showdown on the roof. And one thing I would say in this film is it did introduce the character. I mean, he was previously from the comics, Casey Jones. And I think an interesting thing in this film, which we'll go into in the second film, was there was clearly a romance going on between Casey and April, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, you definitely knew about it by the end of the movie, but you could feel like the tension throughout the movie, so you kind of had an inkling that something was maybe going to happen with Casey.
Absolutely. And that's the thing as well. I mean, you could see that romance was budding. You could see what was going on. I really liked Judith Hoag's portrayal of April O'Neil. I thought she was quite edgy. She was quite gritty. They didn't go for a real girly girl pin-up type. They went for I bought into her being a girl from New York, a reporter, sort of getting down into the grit of it.
She was definitely a stereotypical New Yorker for me. Just with that sort of gritty, very confident, sure of herself, can look after herself type of personality, just demeanor. So you knew that she sort of wouldn't take any crap, even from like the Turtles and stuff, because they're mature as teenagers and things like that. So,
absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, one thing I would say is, I don't know how you feel on this, but I don't feel the Turtles come across overly in this film as teenagers. They don't come across as too childlike. They're quite mature, but then they are of teen. I mean, they are teenage. I believe they're around 15 years old. One thing that I would say, the one character that sort of stands out to me as being a bit different from what I knew growing up was Donatello wasn't really the brains in this movie. I mean, when you look back at the Fred Wolf cartoon, Donatello does machines. He was the, sorry to just badly sing a part of the Turtles song. Donatello was the whiz kid. He was the brains. All the other Turtles I felt really sort of matched what the Fred Wolf cartoon about that. But Donatello, he was a cool character, but he didn't strike me as super nerdy or super brainy in this. I'm not saying he was dumb, but he certainly didn't come across to me as the brainiac with machines. I mean, later on we'll go into the Michael Bay films where they really did push the fact that Donatello was the tech. He was the tech turtle. So, I mean, in your experience of watching the cartoons, what did you think on that?
No, I never really felt like he was sort of pushed to be the brainiac type of one. I always felt like I always felt like Donatello and Michelangelo were more connected, so they sort of pinged off of each other a little bit
Yeah,
more. So, because I thought that they were sort of all brothers, and I thought the immaturity generally came out because they were siblings, and the immaturity was between the siblings. But I never particularly sat and thought, "Oh yeah, that's the smart one," or "That's the moody one." You could
yeah.
tell a little bit by their personalities, but it wasn't like shoved in your face.
I mean, yeah. When you look back at the sort of Fred Wolf cartoon, Raphael was more of a sort of sarcastic, dry wit guy, whereas in this film he's proper New Yorker. I feel he's proper New Yorker. The scene with Casey Jones, who was played by Elias Koteas, or however if I butchered the pronunciation of that, I apologize. I struggle pronouncing my own surname. I really liked that sort of connection there. I mean, and what was interesting to me, going back a bit through the film, Casey Jones's introduction. I mean, another character who I like. I mean, Casey Jones in the cartoon was that, so he is basically a vigilante, and that is what he is in this film. So I like that. I like seeing Raph, all the shouting, damn, as it sort of progressively gets louder. I think I noticed, and I think I read this somewhere, but I noticed this myself. The scene where he stood on the, is it him who stood on the barn and he shouts damn, but I think it was actually Michelangelo stood on the farmhouse when they did that, which is a little bit of an error there in editing. I could be wrong. But the one character in this film who I found, and we haven't touched on him yet, and he's obviously really, really important, the Shredder, Oroko Saki. Man, he scared the crap out of me as a kid. He was, everything about him is perfect. I mean, the scene where he comes walking through with the cape and that, and you've got the sort of aerial shot, and you see his shadow casting, and he's walking across to the foot soldiers. Man, I mean, he's just everything about him. That's everything I would ever envision Shredder to be. He was just menacing, scary. The one time he does meet up with the turtles at the end when he fights them, I mean, he shows he can kick their asses. He is. I mean, the turtles are skilled, but I mean, look at how many foot soldiers it took to take Raph out. I mean, the fact that Shredder just handles them with ease, and he's just so. I mean, the one thing I would say in this film is the overall plot is he's basically a thief. He's just got a gang of thieves running around the city stealing TVs and things. Because there's certainly,
I feel like for a villain, it's not very villainy.
well, no, because what you didn't get Bebop and Rocksteady, you didn't get Krang. There was no Technodrome, which were all things that you saw in the Fred Wolf cartoon. Shredder did have his sidekick, and he was cool. I mean, a chap called James Sato did the voice acting for Shredder in it, and it's a cool voice. I mean, it's let's look back to Star Wars. I mean, it wasn't David Prowse who voiced Darth Vader. It was James Earl Jones. Sorry, God, the Star Wars fans would kill me if I got that wrong. But yeah, it's everything about him's really menacing, and the scene on the roof when Splinter comes up and he sort of connects the dots, because obviously earlier in the film you show the scene where Splinter's master's been murdered, but Splinter the Rat jumps up and attacks Shredder's face and leaves him scarred, and it's that look in his eyes, man, when he takes that mask off and he's just like, oh, I'm gonna kill you. And this, to speak on Splinter, who we haven't really spoken about and we can go into, it's just the fact that Splinter just shows how skilled he is. He just uses one of Mikey's nunchucks. Shredder just charges at him. He's just like, whoop, off the roof you go. Splinter is just effortless, and I just think he's a really funny character in it.
I think, like, I just love Splinter. The way that Splinter was in the original movie, I just love the fact that he's very calm, he's very cool, he's collected, he's very sensei-like, and I just like the fact that you literally don't see his skill until the end of the movie, and the only skill you do see is like a teeny tiny little bit of it. It's not even a lot of skill, it's just a tiny bit. And it's just the fact that most of the time you just sort of see him meditate, and like that's how he sort of calms the turtles down and stuff like that. So he's just he's a very calming influence. I found him a very calming character throughout the movie.
I mean, I appreciate I said you don't see them being very teenage in it, but I mean, there certainly are the scene where like pizza lands on him and stuff, and he's just like, oh, teenage. Is that what he says? I hope it was this film. Well, I'm misremembering. If I've got this wrong, I do apologize. But that's the thing. He's very Mr. Miyagi to me. You know, you watch the Karate Kid films, and like Mr. Miyagi, he only steps in when he has to. I appreciate, you know, you only see Splinter in these 3 films really do one thing, which is that. But I don't know, to me, it just reminds me of Mr. Miyagi. He's just very cool, very wise. He's guiding them. And when he does step in, people are getting messed up. You know, you get the feeling for me with Splinter that when Splinter steps up to fight, you'll better run, because he ain't messing about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's meant to be like that, which makes it even better. I also like the fact that from a practical effects point of view, they didn't make him young particularly.
No, he's real old, isn't he? I mean, he looks...
he's an old rat, which makes it even better.
You know, so if you imagine the turtles at that point are 15, I mean, I imagine this turtles and tortoises and whatnot can live for years, but rats, I don't know the lifespan of. All right, I don't want to look too deep into it. This is the film about mutated turtles and a mutated rat.
Rats can only live about 2 years.
Yeah, so there you go. So the mutagen obviously has its perks. So, you know, at which point you've
anti-wrinkle cream for rats. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Absolutely. No, that's fine. I mean, I'm starting to age out. I could do some mutagen. But yeah, he does. He sells the character well. I mean, the guy we mentioned earlier, Master Tatsu. That was Shredder's second in command, the bald guy. He's pretty cool in it. I mean, in this film he doesn't have a particularly huge role. I think one of my funniest things about this film is when the kids go into sort of the foot soldier lab talking on bits I liked, and this bit sticks with me. It's like when the guy asks about cigarettes and the other guy's like, sure, standard or menthol or whatever. He says it's like, that's crazy. And you've got like all the skateboarding kids, like a scene out of Tony Hawk's and everything. And like little bits like that. It's just showing this crazy world that the foot soldier that the foot have used to sort of charm these kids in. But the foot are really harsh, man. That scene where that guy's sort of fighting and trialing, and they take no mercy. They kick the crap out of him. It's like he gets beat. It's like, damn, man. So it's
I feel like the movie was very much of its time. I definitely felt when I was watching it, I could definitely remember the clothes. Definitely remember
the fashion.
Music. Yeah, I definitely like. Do you know what? It was a really nice trip down memory lane, because it's like, okay, I know people say that millennials are all stuck in the past and stuff like that, but I think people forget the 90s was a very big decade where a lot of stuff developed. And
God, yeah.
Technology really came into play and stuff like that. So I think it was just a nice trip down memory lane, but also made me feel really old.
Yeah, and talking about the fashion in it, just to one of the characters, I loved that the establishing shot of April O'Neil, she was in like a sort of yellow coat, which was very much a sort of a throw to the Fred Wolf cartoon, because you know she's a reporter in that. But you know, I did love that. There's little things in it. I mean, obviously, that as we previously said, or I previously said, it is a good mixture for me of the. It takes the key elements of the comic book, not to go too deep into it. It takes all the things that kids would have liked, most of the things kids would have liked from the Fred Wolf cartoon, but smashes them together. And for me, it was just a perfect film, and I believe that's why it did so well. So that's going to take me now into, you know, we've got to move through these films, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Muse, Secret of the Ooze. So yeah. Do
you want a quick tidbit?
Go on, give everyone a little rundown of the basic story in case they haven't seen it.
Cool.
Again,
so Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze The turtles find out where the ooze, the substance which made them mutate, came from. Unfortunately, Shredder learns about it too and uses it to enhance himself. So the turtles have to prove again who's the better ninja fighter.
Yes. Now, this film, as we'd already said, it had a larger budget. It took less money. I believe, sorry, here just to check my notes.
78.7 million.
Yeah, so just under $79 million it took, and it had an increased budget of 25 million. And I think before we go in too much into the story and what happened, I mean, I like this film. I saw this film at the cinema like the week it came out. I remember my uncle taking me to see this film. I really enjoyed this as a kid. Like I thought this was the most amazing film ever when I saw it. Like, no joke. And I didn't actually see the first Turtles film at the cinema. I had an illegal pirate copy that the same uncle took me to see it gave me. So my copy wasn't even something we didn't say while we spoke on the first Turtles film. In the UK, they edited out the nunchuck scenes. Mine had them in. I'm sure I remember them, or I'm misremembering because the years have passed. But they toned the violence down in this film massively. The Turtles didn't use their weapons. The scene at the beginning, where they're coming in and they're Ernie Reyes Jr. plays Keno in it, and he's the pizza delivery guy who goes at the beginning and happens to have a bit of a fight with these guys who are robbing a shop or a deli or whatever it is. Sort of beats the crap out of one of them and says something along the lines of, "Did I mention I study martial arts?" I mean, I know we haven't really touched on the people who played the guys in the turtle suits in the films because there's just so much information. But interestingly, I will just say, well, I remember this, Ernie Reyes Jr. was stunt performer for Donatello in the previous film, but the producers liked him, so they brought him into the second film. Anyway, the turtles come in. You have the scene where they jump up and all that. But I think in that scene, what did we have? There was a yo-yo, wasn't there? They knocked out some guys with a yo-yo.
There was a clown that moved back and forth. I hate clowns.
And Donatello pretended to be him and rocked back and forth and got the guy.
And then he lost his nunchucks, so the nunchucks turned into salami. Well, he didn't even lose his nunchucks, actually. I correct myself. He just used salami. Which I think it was just that. To me, that was so stupid. I would have found it funnier if he'd actually had his original weapons and he got thrown over the counter, lost his weapon, so he just picked up the nearest thing to fight.
It was like two salamis, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just reminds me of very much on Golden Harvest's whole point, because they dealt with Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan did a lot of similar stuff in his own movies, and so did Bruce Lee. They picked up stuff around them when they lost their original.
Which I guess you could argue is the way of the ninja, I guess. But if you've got these turtles, even in the comic, in the cartoon, certainly established, Leonardo has katanas, Raph has sais, Donnie has a bow staff, or just a stick, as I used to call it, and Mikey, not so much in the UK, because just to say here in the UK, they changed the title of the cartoon to Hero Turtles because ninjas are bad. If you said ninja in the 90s, you melted away. So they changed it to Hero Turtles. Yet the film was released as Ninja Turtles anyway. I digress. But so they cut out the nunchuck scenes, and then Michelangelo picks up something which literally looks exactly like a meat-based version of nunchucks, and then does the whole thing with them. So I'm like,
I just don't understand what's the difference between beating somebody with a bit of wood, which is what a nunchuck's made out of, or cured meat. I don't see what the difference is. They're both going to cause damage.
It is comedic and it is funny. And I mean, as I said, as a kid, I literally thought this film I thought it was better than the first Turtles film. As a kid, I really did. I thought it was absolutely nothing could beat it. I mean, the story. I mean, you've obviously got the TGRIUs in it that they find, and later on in April O'Neil, who's now actually played by, I'm gonna rack my brains here, Paige Turco.
Yeah.
Yep. So they changed the actress for April O'Neil. Kim, do you want to take away why they did that? Because when we were researching this, you had a real good memory for that.
So basically, they changed because Judith wasn't called back in to reprise her role as April O'Neil. The director wasn't happy after she sort of derided the way that of the mistreatment on the stunt doubles and how unfair the schedule changes and stuff were. She did state though at SuperCon in Florida that she didn't have any ill will towards like Paige Turkle or anything like that. She just obviously just didn't agree with how the directors and producers were handling stuff. So she wasn't asked back, so they just had to pick somebody else.
I mean, I wouldn't word it like this. I mean, obviously, doing the research for this podcast, I mean, I've watched just about every blooming documentary and retrospective going on Turtles. And one guy goes on to say in his retrospective, and it's his opinion, I'm not saying it's wrong, but he's like, oh, they got rid of Judith Hoag for a younger, I don't think she was any younger, prettier woman. And I mean, I'm not looking at it like that. I mean, it's just literally that. It's a casting decision. I think they obviously thought that Judith Hoag was a pain in the ass, so they got someone to replace her.
Yeah.
This was a
Happens
massive,
all the time.
Yeah, massive Goliath of a film. I mean, you know, you look at the first Iron Man film, War Machine. I can't remember who played him in each film, but they changed actors from film 1 to film 2, and a really, you know, very different sort of guy played War Machine in the second film. Sorry that I can't remember the actor's name. And it works. It just works. But something else that this film really lacked, didn't have Casey Jones in it. Suddenly Casey Jones is just not there.
There was just so many gaps in it for me. It's like, so Casey Jones and April O'Neil have a massive kiss at the end of the first movie, and then there's just nothing in the second movie. You're like, what?
Yeah, because isn't it in the first film? Isn't it basically Shredder goes off the roof and then lands in a dumpster truck, and Casey Jones crushes him. So that's worth saying. So I didn't say that in the previous part. And they share it. They have a snog, as we'd say, and you think, oh, they're all in love and they're going to make little masked lunatic babies and whatnot. And no, he's just not.
There's no relation to it. There's no link to it. They don't bring it up in any capacity. It's not like they tried to fill a hole.
They didn't even say, oh, Casey's away doing something. Or it's just no Casey anymore
at all.
Which is a shame, because he was a really good character. And of course, the big thing about this film is obviously the Shredder survives being crushed in the dumpster truck.
Yeah,
he comes back to take lead of the Foot Clan. He finds out about this ooze, the T.G.R.I. mutagen, or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, so his logical thing is, I want revenge on the Turtles. And the main thing is he makes his own 2 big mutants to fight them, Toka and Razza, which are basically, in my opinion, and from everything I researched on this, the main reason being, they're no Bebop and Rocksteady. No Bebop and Rocksteady at all. Now, everything we both researched this, and we both sort of came to this conclusion from what we could find. The most put out there theory is that the Threadball production company, who owned the rights to the cartoon, didn't want to give rights for the film production to use Bebop and Rocksteady. So they came up with their own, a snapping turtle and a wolf, Toka and Razza. And, you know, the beautiful thing this film had, as we'd already said, is unfortunately Jim Henson passed away in 1990, but his son his son pretty much took the lead in the first film. It's worth saying, but he took it on. I would, you know, the look stayed the same. I would say the turtle suits and faces looked a bit different. They not completely different. Not
massively. Not massively. I think the other thing to take into consideration, a lot of it, they did sort of make it with sort of latex foam and stuff. It was still kind of a new concept at that particular point. Restoration on latex foam was not. It was just not high on people's agendas at all. Like, if you actually Google and look at pictures of Hoggle and stuff from the Labyrinth, they didn't take care of him after the film finished. Like, if you see some of the pictures of even the turtles now from background, the restoration on it is just horrendous because they just didn't have the technique, the skill, the products, things like that. Like they look like a rotting corpse.
Yeah, I mean,
basically.
you've got a background in this stuff. You've studied this. You've done work in this, so you have a real understanding of it. It's what you did at uni, wasn't it? It's your big degree and stuff. But so I guess from what you're saying, basically the suits from the first film were probably quite battered even after a year. Is that possible after all that? I guess there would have been a lot of use. There'd have been a lot of abuse.
Well, there's a lot of use. It's a lot of flexibility. There would have been tears. There would have been discoloration, anything like that. And they would have obviously wouldn't have made them from scratch. They would have tried to fix them up as much as possible. And they weren't specialized in it. They weren't expert in it. It was still sort of a new product. It's also a very temperamental product to kind of use. It's everything's got to be the right. So like when I used it personally, it's got to have the right temperature, timings have got to be right, oven temperatures have got to be fine when you bake it. The things that you use on it have to be right, otherwise it can disintegrate different types of sort of the molecules and stuff in the foam. So they probably didn't have half that knowledge that I had when I was having to deal with it.
No, I guess you were sort of all those years after. I guess they had all the trial and error, and you had the advantage.
I think they did a really good job considering it was the most up-to-date technology of the time from a practical effects side of things, a puppeteering side of things, and also from a computing side of things. It was the most modern.
Because I'm guessing all the servos and stuff and the puppetry and the mechanical parts would have put a lot of wear and tear on the faces as well. And
it was Splinter was 3 puppeteers just for his facial expressions.
Wow, that's so much. That is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Turtles, it's not a huge I think the reason I probably noticed it more this time around is because I literally watched Turtles and I put Turtles 2 in, Turtles 3, and so but it's very subtle. I mean, once we chat into the third film, there's quite a big difference there. As I say, this film, I mean, still no Technodrome, still no Krang, didn't have Bebop and Rocksteady. We've already said that and the reasons why. Toka and Razar. The general story was just a whole lot more childish. I mean, the scene where they're sort of about to go against Toka and Razar, and oh goodness me, what is his name? Professor Jordan Perry. Yes, I'm looking at my notes. It was right in front of me. He comes up with almost a vaccine, not a vaccine, but a cure, whatever you want to call it, something that will reverse the effects of the mutagen. Because I mean, and so they decide what they need to do is put this stuff in an ice cube and put it in a donut to feed to Toka and Razar, rather than just putting it in the icing or in the jam or jelly for our American friends.
Like, let's eat a donut because
the secret ceremony of the donut eating.
And then it's like, oh yeah, we're going to put the reverse antidote thing inside an ice cube, inside a donut. When you're like, any sensible person would have put it in the icing or the batter or like the filling. Why would you put an ice cube inside a cake, like inside a donut?
I mean, they establish earlier on in the film that because Toka and Razar have been mutated so quickly, they're essentially infant. Although they're big, strong, hulking, snapping turtle and wolf, the scene where they see Shredder and is it Mama, and they sort of,
I wouldn't have even said Razar was that great looking. I thought he was quite cheap looking. It was kind of wacky looking.
I don't think that the creature effects on Toka and Razar, I think they stood out quite a lot from the Turtles. Yeah. I think you can actually see that there was perhaps not as much thought or time or money spent, because the faces on them certainly don't have the same movement.
Do you know what? The Funko looks better for Razar.
Oh wow, we hate Funkos. Sorry if you're a Funko collector.
I only have a Jack Skellington as Santa. It's okay.
scooting straight past that bombshell. Yeah, so, but the basic plot: Shredder, I want revenge. Toko Raza, get this ooze. Blah blah blah. Obviously, the turtles want to know a bit more about their origin. There was one of the scenes I really like in the film, and I did enjoy this. Looking back, is when sort of Shredder's, number two is there, the bold guy, and they're almost having a game of football in the lab. And in that scene, I will say, it's almost like they decided to make Donatello a bit more techie and a bit more nerdy to sort of line him up with the cartoon. I did like all of that where they're sort of catching the mutagen and everything. I thought that was cool. Even looking back now, it was a good bit of fun. I enjoyed that, but yeah, then it all leads to the sort of final showdown. And yeah, your absolute favorite, Kim, do you want to tell anyone listening to this what your favorite part of the film was?
Bloody Vanilla Ice, like why?
Obviously, I said that with absolute sarcasm, despite the tone of my voice. Kim wasn't a fan of Vanilla Ice being in the movie. You didn't like the ninja rap, did you?
Just not a fan of Vanilla Ice in general.
Well,
he basically just, people are like, oh, it's his song, and I was like, no, it's not, it's Queen's, but it's fine.
Well, when you think, I know we haven't really gone into the soundtracks, but when you think in the first one, like Partners in Crime did T.U.R.T.L.E Power, and in this film,
they literally just wanted a slogan.
You've got Vanilla Ice doing ninja rap, and he does the dance, and like when the turtles are up dancing and they're giving it all, and
but he's also still wearing MC Hammer trousers.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it was the 90s. Give him a break,
I don't care though. It's just like, no, they used him because he was a big name at the time, so it would push the film a little bit more. And then they had this, do you know what? That just shows you how good it is, because I don't even remember the rap.
Well, I'm just going to say to you that, like, in the 90s, when I was been probably 6 when this come out, coming on 7, if you'd offered me a pair of white MC Hammer trousers, a blazer, and a Vanilla Ice haircut, I'd have loved that. Just saying.
Okay, so we'll be questioning our friendship after this podcast, but that's fine. We can move on.
Well, after the Funko bombshell, I think there's already questions raised. But yeah, so the story's quite the story is what it is. You gave the summary. We filled in a few of the bits here and there. I mean, we have, as I say, we've got the 5 films to get through, but the film, it's a much more childish tone. I think that's all I'm going to say on it. I think it's fun. It's enjoyable.
It's not as much a family movie as the first one.
Yeah, I think the first movie had the whole kids would love it, parents would love it. I mean, the one scene which I will say from the first movie that as a kid, I thought lasted literally for probably an hour, and it actually didn't, was the scene where they're back at the farmhouse and that. I thought that was really slow as a kid. I even remember fast forwarding through that. This film, which I think is a really great scene now as an adult, watching it as an adult makes the first film brilliant, but sort of watching the second film, it is more of a kid's film. I mean, I appreciate that my son does not speak for all children of the world, and I get that, but Jax loves the second film, gets a little bit fidgety and restless in the first film, again about the same scene as I did as a kid. So, but then overall, I mean, a lot of sequels don't take as much money. That's quite an established, there's always the exception.
Yeah. But
I think, looking on this film, I think it was a misstep to take it in the direction they took it. I really do. I think that I'm not saying that it would have done 202 million again, but I do think that the direction they took this did probably damage the overall box office of this.
Kept going downhill from there.
Yes, well, and it's probably, to keep things moving swiftly, it's probably now wise to go into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, which, as I've already said, a lot of people called Turtles in Time. Not correct. That's not how it was released. Well, so I'm told. Everywhere I've read said that, because I will say I thought it was called Teenage Mutant. See, even on that poster there, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Turtles in Time. Every bit of research I've done has said that that has been added later on, and that initially it was literally just released as Turtles 3. So, you know, it's become known as Turtles in Time, because obviously Turtles in Time was a Nintendo game, I believe, even an arcade game.
Yeah, it was.
Which I was a Sega kid, so I didn't really get much exposure to the terrible Turtles games, which were terrible. But anyway, that's off subject. I think I'm just trying to avoid talking about Turtles 3, if I'm completely honest. Look. Do you
want me to like swap to the tip bit?
Go on, jump into the give the people in attendance the basic outline of the film and the plot.
So, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, we'll just say 3. Ancient Japan, 1393, without a map, without a clue, without a pizza. The international phenomenon that is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles returns for a daring trip back in time. When their closest friend, April O'Neil, is accidentally transported to 17th century Japan, the Turtles spring into action, using a mysterious scepter to travel after her. Cowabunga! What they discover is they've landed right in the middle of a rebel samurai war. Now, with precious time on their side, they must save April and survive the deadly battle before it spills over into present-day New York City.
So there we have it. I'm just going to say, all these like film synopses here, we won't take credit for what's not ours. But they are basically taken from IMDb, because with a little bit of editing here and there, because Kim's very pedantic about her grammar, as I found out.
You make it sound like a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not a bad thing.
You put a comma in the wrong place, it could completely change a dynamic.
It absolutely can. So the first big thing most people talk about with this film, and there is no escaping it, it's no longer Jim Henson's Creature Workshop doing the practical effects for the Turtles. And in my opinion, they're not terrible, but man, they ain't great either. It's possible to not be terrible and not be good. That's all I'm saying. And the Turtles look like they've lost a load of muscle mass. They've suddenly got like green acne all over them, little spots everywhere. Their faces move like really fast, and they've got really big teeth. Really big teeth.
The faces are just not the same. And I also think their masks look like Play-Doh.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate, before we get into talking about the story, I found watching this film, between the fact that it took me 3 attempts to get through it as an adult, because I fell asleep 3 times watching this film. I really, really struggled with this. I am a child of ADHD. It doesn't leave you as an adult.
Literally the temptation to pick up my phone and do stuff on that instead of actually watching the film was down. It was just I really struggled. I know we're on chatting Turtles 3 now. I can say now, I think Turtles 2 was overall, if you sum everything up, I think it was a good film, an enjoyable film that I will watch again. This film, not so much. I could go the rest of my life without seeing this.
The thing is, I think had the story have been better, I could have forgiven or looked past the practical effects and the complete change of design for the Turtles. I probably could have. I mean, it would always niggle, but I could look past it. But we've got the Turtles going back in time. We've got the return of Casey Jones, Elias Koteas as Casey Jones, completely wasted. He ends up babysit. So basically, in this film, April buys all the Turtles present at a thrift store or whatever it's called in America. Apologies, I don't know. We'd probably just say charity shop here. They all get their presents. I think Mikey gets a lampshade. What does Raph get? Donnie gets a broken radio. Do you know, I can't even remember. I apologize that on these other films, I found myself stopping myself talking about things like stay on target, stay on target. Not so much this one. I struggled. Anyway, Splinter gets this magical scepter. He reads this translation on it. April goes back in time, as Kim already said in the synopsis. The Turtles then repeat the step. But the thing is, when April went back in time, somebody else came back from the past. So from like feudal Japan, this other guy shows up, and they change clothes as well, which I find really bizarre. So the Turtles do this, and they go back to rescue April O'Neil, and Donatello, with his super brain, works out they've got, is it 60 hours to get back before the space-time continuum goes nuts. There's basically some guy called, I believe it's pronounced, and I wrote this down. I tried to break it down into phonetics here, but I struggled. Lord Narinja. His son is the first guy, I believe, goes back when April goes back in time. They switch places. Stick with me here. It gets confusing. I do apologize. I've had to watch the film and read the plot of it several times to straighten it out in my head. This Lord Narinja is just hacking villages in feudal Japan. He is, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. There's a rebel out there, a lady called Mitsu, who happens to have a secret love affair with Lord Narinja's son, who's gone back to present time and switched with April O'Neil. And anyway, the Turtles go back. They end up, their first scene back in time, they end up on horseback, all dressed up like samurai. So you're crossing the ninja to samurai. They're different things, but hey ho, this is the plot of the film. There's a battle in like a village, houses being burnt down. One of the Turtles ends up saving, what is his name? I have written it down here. I should remember this because it's same name as the character from Mario, Yoshi, a little boy called Yoshi, who is the daughter, I do apologize, the son of Mitsu. Leonardo performs CPR on him, and they all think it's some kind of witchcraft. They all obviously love the Turtles now, and then the scepter goes missing. They try to make a new scepter. That gets broken because the Turtles are being dicks and arguing. The original scepter's gone missing. It's actually hidden by Mitsu's dad because he wants the Turtles to stay. There's a gun dealer called Walker, who's probably one of the best characters in the film. He's a really interesting character. He's not really interesting. He's just the most interesting character. He's got he's got a guy working for him who's supposedly imprisoned called Whit, who is played by Lars Cotias. So you've got Casey Jones in the future now babysitting the four guys who change place for the Turtles. I promise you, sorry, this gets confusing. And you've got Casey Jones in the past. It's never revealed to us if this is a distant relation of Casey Jones's or if they just share an uncanny resemblance. He betrays the Turtles. Ultimately, Walker gets shot off the roof. The Turtles go back in time. Two of them don't want to go back. That is the film. I'm sorry if there was no passion in saying that, but that is the long and short of it. So, Kim, your thoughts on the film before I just waffle on any longer?
I feel like I'm just tired listening to explaining the plot.
Do you know what?
No, I don't know where to start with it. It's just, even all, I just wasn't a film that I got into. I didn't understand the story particularly.
There is such a wealth of, by this point in time, with all the comic books, there was such a wealth of characters they could have picked from. We could have had Baxter Stockman. We could have had, God, now my brain goes blank. But we could have so many characters they could have brought in. Krang. You could have brought Krang in. I mean, look at the special effects. If they could animate, if they could get the Turtles going, they could have got a blobby brain going.
I don't know why they decided to go back in time. I don't know why they had to pull in like I don't know why they had to go back. And also, why is it every single time people like teleport or go back in time, there's always got to be a scepter and there's always got to be a storm?
Because them's the rules of time traveling, Kim. Did you not know? It's that or a DeLorean, to be fair. No, that was only one series of films, but yeah, no, they changed yeah, so that's the basic plot of the film. I don't have a lot more to say on this film other than why on earth did they not? I know we've covered it briefly. I mean, remembering the details from my head, but why they just, it's bad enough that they had to change companies for the practical effects. That's one big stumbling block. They waited 2 years. Money. Oh, to me, this felt, I think that probably Turtles was probably on a decline anyway at this point, because everything has a shelf. I mean, I appreciate all these years later, Turtles has been redone umpteen times, but this particular iteration of Turtles, I think, was probably reaching towards the end. And although it didn't, what did it take? Was it 50 something odd million this film took? Just to look back on my notes. It took 54.4 million on a reduced budget versus the second film. So, you know, in Hollywood terms, that's a failure. I mean, in the real world, we'll go at more than doubled its money. But no, it failed miserably. The story is boring to the point that I was struggling to go through that, and I had notes.
And like Splinter looks completely different, also.
Yeah,
and it's also a different voice actor.
I mean, same vibe. To be fair, they changed voice actors through most of the films. We haven't gone into and it's worth saying here, there's no disrespect to the people who played the Turtles in the suits. So, lots of people did. Lots of different people voiced them. It's purely a time issue that we haven't gone into this.
But we do give them a big shout out.
We do give them a big shout out, because without them, you know, the film literally wouldn't have happened. I mean, one notable voice actor for the films, in the first film, Corey Feldman did the voice of Donatello. Second film, he'd had issues in his private life and don't want him. He's a bad image. He's back for the third film. So,
but also Leonardo and Michelangelo were played by the same people for all 3 films.
Yes.
For voice actors.
They were. I mean, for voice actors, yeah. I mean, as for stunt performers, I think they changed up most films, didn't they?
But even like people, so a lot of people love Raphael, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet, each film was a different person voicing him.
Yeah, and you see, this is interesting because when we were talking about this, when we were sort of going through all our research and that, I said, you know, I didn't really notice the change in the voices. And Kim's like, how did you not notice it?
Yeah, I did.
Like, I didn't. I mean, jumping right back to the first film, something I made a particular note of here, which blew my mind. So sorry, we're on 3, but I just want to get this out there. All of the 4 actors who played the Turtles in the first film all had cameos in the first film, which I think is out of suit. So I've got it written down here because I'd never remember it all. David Foreman, who was Leonardo, appeared as a gang member. Michelin Sisti, who, sorry, I pronounced that terribly, who played Michelangelo, was the pizza delivery guy when he's on about the pizza being late. Leif Tilden, who was Donatello, he was the messenger for the foot, but that meant he had a mask on, so he was out of one costume into another. And Josh Pace, he played Raphael. So when Raphael rolls across the bonnet of the car and there's a passenger in the car, what's that? And the taxi driver goes, I think it was a turtle in a trench coat. The guy who says, what was that? Was actually Raphael. So anyway, back to Turtles 3. I think if we sum up on Turtles 3, that's about where I am with it.
And should have never been made.
Yeah, I mean, harsh.
Not really.
But one thing I like about you, Kim, you're firm but fair.
I'm sure there's loads of people that would agree with me. So
to be fair, I say harsh, but you know, all the way through this, do you remember I was messaging you on the day, said I hate this film.
I feel like you say I'm harsh, but you fell asleep 3 times.
No, I'm only taking the mick. Well, I'm only taking the mick when I say harsh. Look, I've done nothing but slate this film for the last couple of months. Even to the point of I've actually watched every other film at least twice in preparation for this. I watched this one once.
Feel like it's the
That
only
was it.
DVD. It's the only DVD disc that will gather dust in that case.
Oh god, yeah, because we bought all the films so that we could have them and watch them on repeat and make
Yeah,
our
I
notes.
know.
And Turtles 3, it's like, well, no.
Once was enough.
But yeah, so now look, we've gone through what I call the heyday, and now we've got to get into Bayday because we've got to move through this. We've got to get to the end goal and make our decision here. So moving on to the Michael Bay era, I'm going to go through the key facts of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2004, produced
14.
by Michael.
14.
2014.
And stop
My
taking
apologies.
my slot. You're taking my slot.
Oh, I do apologise. Sorry, was this your one? I'll
This
hand
is
this
my
back
slot.
to you. I'll shut up. There you go. That's the joy of doing this completely unrehearsed live. You crack on, girl. You go for it.
So, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2014, released August 8th, 2014. Budget was very, very hard to find a specific budget, so we were more looking at 125 to 150 million dollars. Box office 493.3 million, obviously produced by Michael Bay. Previous work, sort of, we all know Transformers, Bad Boys, Armageddon. It was distributed by Paramount. Directed by Jonathan Liebsman. Apologies if I've butchered that. However, he was nominated for a Golden Razzie for the worst director for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Previous work, however, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, and the Halo TV series, obviously based on the Xbox game. And practical special effects were done by Industrial Light and Magic, so ILM.
Right, and being as you are the person in charge, and I don't want to take your slot, do you want to give your brief summary of the film? What is the brief plot of the film, so we can expand on it a bit?
Darkness has settled over New York City as Shredder and his evil Foot Clan have an iron grip on everything from the police to the politicians. The future is grim until 4 unlikely outcast brothers rise from the sewers and discover their destiny as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Turtles must work with fearless reporter April O'Neil and her cameraman Vern Fenwick to save the city and unravel Shredder's diabolical plan.
So, I'm sorry, I was checking I wasn't muted then. So, what can we say about Transformers with the Turtles in it? that's probably all I could think watching this film. Anyway, this film, so yeah, it's most definitely a Michael Bay movie. Interesting that I think there's only actually one big explosion in this film, which is at the end when Michelangelo blows up Vern's van. But we'll get through the plot here. This film, so it changes quite a few things. I mean, we haven't overly covered we haven't really gone into the origin of the Turtles for this. I mean, the origin in the cartoon versus the 90s films is slightly different. The origin in the 90s films is much more along the lines of the comic book. But in this film, the first thing which I found difficult when I was watching it, well, no, to say difficult is unfair. I did not understand the need for it to be connected to April O'Neil, that they were her pet turtles that her dad experimented on, hence why they mutated, and that she named the turtles. And that Splinter learned ninjutsu through finding a book in a drain and reading. He read this Japanese book. He could read Japanese, right? And he learned the way of ninjutsu and taught the turtles this.
But also, how does April O'Neil forget that she had pet turtles and a rat?
Before we go too deep into the plot of this, I mean, there is a scene in the film where she sees the turtles and they try and be menacing and that, and she hears their names and she has to rush back to her apartment and flick through videotapes from her dad's lab to confirm to herself that these are the same turtles. Come on, dude. 4 turtles that were experimented on by your dad called Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael. I don't even think Sherlock Holmes would need to put too much. Sorry, what I should say is I don't think you'd need to be Sherlock Holmes to connect the dots there.
No.
So there's bits in there that I struggle with in that sense. I mean, in the 90s films, Splinter learned the way of ninja. He's a rat who's in a cage. He learns it from watching his master, who's murdered basically by Shredder. Goes to New York, blah blah blah. Turtles happens. We've gone through it. This film, they're all from a lab basically, and they are pets. So that's the first thing. But when this film was announced, there were big rumors going around that Michael Bay was going to make them aliens. So there is a line in the film. I'm not going to say it exactly where they say, "What did you think we were, aliens or something?" And I think that was a dig at all the rumors online because they weren't alien. Sorry,
he's so petty.
I thought you ment me then. I was going to say.
No, I'm just thinking
unfair.
like of that. No, I'm just thinking of that's what Michael Bay did. He's so petty.
So yeah, just to touch a bit more on the plot here. I mean, this film does give you some cool stuff. It does give you some fan service. It changes the origin, but it does take bits from all different versions of the Turtles. So and I will say now, I don't actually think it's a bad film. And I know people go, "What?" I do think it's very much like Transformers.
Like I could definitely watch the movie again. Would I go out of my way to watch it? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, the long and short of this story is, Shredder is in the film. There's a chap called Eric Sachs who's a rich guy. He teams up with a Shredder. This is the basics of the plot. They decide with this chemical that Sachs has made to create a virus that they want to spread around New York. But they are going to be the people to cure it. So they're going to make their millions or billions. This already uber rich guy, this guy who is richer than rich, he's probably not far off the top 1% of America, the way he makes himself out in the film. He wants to be richer. So to do that, he's going to, rather than like coming up with a cure to cure other things, he's going to manufacture a virus and then sell the cure to people with the help of the Shredder. Then the Turtles get entangled in a bit of a thing where they have a battle, and then they have to kidnap the Turtles and drain their blood to come up with a thing. The Turtles get what is it? They inject adrenaline into them, don't they? That's one of the scenes I really like where they're going nuts, and Leonardo's like, "Oh man, I feel like I want to clean the dojo." It's like what? They're just like kids on sugar. That is funny. I do think they did come across, there were certain scenes in this film where they did come across very, very teenage. There's a scene where just before the final battle with the Shredder, and we'll talk a bit more about the Shredder, where they start rapping in the lift.
Yeah.
They like start beatboxing. I don't know what, I loved that scene. I thought that scene was one of the absolute best bits of that movie.
You just like get the snippet of like the teenage immaturity a little bit from them when they're like that.
Yeah, because I mean, Raphael is a complete dick in this movie. I mean, he is a dick.
100%. His hormones are clearly going everywhere, and he's just being an ass. But
just to say, it's probably important to say if you haven't seen these films. So, the Turtles are quite short in the comic. They're very short in the cartoon. They're short. They're not even as tall as April O'Neil. So, what's the average female height? 5'5"? 5'4", 5'5"? I don't know.
I feel like we're probably going to offend people regardless of what we say.
Yeah, but so I have quite a tall wife, so
I'm 5'4".
And
I'm classed as small.
Okay. So my missus is around 5'6". And all my sisters are very tall women, taller than me. Some of them, believe it or not. Anyway, so the Turtles are quite short, and in this film, these Turtles are hench. They are 6-foot units. They look like American football players when they've got all their padding on. Mm-hmm. And their shells are bulletproof as well, because there's a scene in the film. Why not? Why not? Why wouldn't their shells be bulletproof?
I love that they didn't know that.
Yeah, and they discover that when they turn around and duck, and but their shells are bulletproof, but the Shredder manages in a fight with Raphael to crack his shell by stamping on it. So
That's because he's got an Optimus Prime / Megatron armor.
yeah,
That's
so
why.
I started this by saying, what can I say about Transformers with the turtles in? Is it just because it's Michael Bay's style? I had a theory through this. I said to you that I'm convinced he was trying to create a shared universe with the Transformers. Because like
100%.
when he in the end battle, there's an end battle where it all goes onto the roof, and believe it or not, April O'Neil gets the final like sort of kick on the Shredder, which does it, and which beats him. But they're fighting the Shredder, and he's like a cross between Megatron, a Swiss Army knife, and just mechanicalness. You know, it's nothing like a Shredder you've ever seen before. You watch the 90s films, and Shredder is like, you know,
He's still human, like he's still got a bit of humanity to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And this
He's
is
wearing a fancy helmet and a cape.
Yeah, and you don't. And in fairness, I don't believe they show his face in this. I mean, all right, in the first 90s film, Shredder was wearing red. The second film, I didn't say this, but he's wearing purple because they very much tried to marry it up to match the second film, to match the Fred Wolf comic. But jumping forward to this, I mean, the turtles, they've got lips. That threw me. And I think this is where I want to have a little bit of a chat about. I'm not going to dog on the CGI on this, because I don't think the CGI in this film is bad at all.
No,
I think it's well done CGI. Whether it's
though, not in Splinter.
No,
the CGI in Splinter is a bit off.
He is a bit off. Whether it stands the test of time like the practical suits will, I don't know, because we're only 5-6 years on from this film. So to me, it still looks good, and obviously it had a hell of a budget thrown at it, and it had ILM working on it. So you've got the best in the business.
Yeah.
With a massive budget, so you are going to have good stuff. So the CGI, it didn't. I know a lot of people say it didn't take me out of the movie. I had no issue watching computer animated turtles at all.
Yeah, I wasn't focused on the inconsistencies and stuff like that, like I usually am.
Yeah, some films you see, like when they do the special edition Star Wars films, and they just randomly slop a bit of CGI in there, and you're like, what? What? That just really stands out. That's ruined that. Like, it blows your brain. You're like, that's just for me personally, it takes me out of the scene. Didn't have any of that with this.
No. To be quite honest, the whole film for me, I know it's meant to be about the turtles, but it literally just felt like he wanted to make another Transformer film, but the Transformers had decided to take some annual leave, and the Ninja Turtles were the only people that were available.
Now, this is a scene that I will hands up say, although I watched both of the Michael Bay films twice, somehow I missed this scene on my brain, deleted it. Was it this one or Out of the Shadows, the sequel to this, where someone's dressed up as Bumblebee in it?
Yeah, it was the second film. So there's like Halloween, there's like a Halloween parade, and it's Michelangelo who's like, oh, this is the first time I can just be myself and I don't need to pretend, because like it's a costume. And he goes up, and then all of a sudden this little yellow car appears, and then the guy stands up and it's bloody Bumblebee.
I mean,
and I was like, wow, that's just predictable.
It's, well, I mean, I know it, and that's why I say, although I didn't spot that, and I thought that he's trying to do a crossover. Some of the casting in this film's interesting. I mean, Megan Fox for April O'Neil. I know we haven't gone deeply into the cast on these films, but she's. I mean,
she was there for candy.
Yeah, there's no one out there who's ever going to say that Megan Fox is an unattractive woman. She's a very attractive woman, but I don't feel her character. I didn't get the feeling of April O'Neil being that from like Turtles 1990, where you got that sort of, you feel like she's a tough, gritty New Yorker making her way. In this film, I just feel like she's just doing a bit of jokey news stuff. They want to keep her on all the not serious reports. She wants to sort of investigate stuff, but it doesn't. I mean, it's even scenes like, you know, the scene in the film where they have her doing a segment on this trampolining class, and they zoom in on like her chest and stuff. And like, I'm a bloke, yeah, but even I was like, was that necessary? And Michelangelo has like a real sort of unhealthy obsession with her. He's really got the hots for her. And I do believe it was this movie where he makes a comment something along the lines of, "Dude, my shell's getting tight." When he looks
Wow, I
at
didn't
April
even
O'Neil.
notice that line.
Yeah, no, I picked up on that and I was like, what? Oh my God, no. It's lines like that where
Yeah, but
I
do you know
just,
what? I feel like Megan Fox, she didn't do April O'Neil any justice, because I'm sitting there being like, you're meant to be a woman in your 20s, you're meant to be a reporter living on your own in New York City, you've been through college and done all this sort of stuff. Why are you still an immature, whiny little thing?
yeah, I
Like,
mean, obviously they make her out to have daddy issues because in this film, it's worth saying that Eric Sachs was actually working with April O'Neil's dad. We haven't already said this. He basically, April O'Neil's dad finds out about what Sachs wants to do, tries to burn down the lab. That's how the turtles end up escaping, because the safest thing to do with them is just put them out in the middle of the bloody road. April. Her dad dies, so she's got sort of the typical Hollywood movies daddy issue sort of thing, hasn't she, going on a little bit? And
she just wasn't an April O'Neil to me. I just found her whiny. I found her immature.
I
And
liked the
like,
yellow coat. I loved the yellow coat. I loved
yeah,
the
okay.
reference to that.
Yeah, they made
That doesn't
references, but
save the
I
character.
just felt she was so she was just really whiny.
Hmm. And it just,
I just couldn't be bothered, and it was just like she was just like, "Oh, the terrorists just need to save me," and I was like, "Can you not just do something on your own? Why do you have to put yourself into stupid predicaments?"
see, when I was doing the research and watching this and all the things I did, the one character in the film, um, Whoopi Goldberg's character in the film. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg's in this film. I mean, hell, Johnny Knoxville voices Leonardo in this film, which is something I did not realize until we got in the notes. Didn't even pick up on that. Whoopi Goldberg, I'm just checking my notes here. She plays, I just know her as April's boss, but the character's name is Bernadette Thompson. And a lot of people online and stuff are saying, oh, Whoopi Goldberg's a real bitch in this film, blah, blah, blah. She's horrible. It's like, no, I think what she was saying to April was fine. Like, you're going to come to me telling me you've seen giant turtles, or you want me to investigate something because you've seen a bit of painted graffiti. Go away. With no proof. It's like, no, she's like the most practical, logical part of the film. She's like, no way. And so I didn't think she was a bad character. So I didn't think she was a bad character. She's not a big character in the film, but I just wanted to note that Whoopi Goldberg was in this film,
She had some bills to pay.
She had bills. She had to pay him. I think she's pretty rich, but but in this film, it's basically just on the shredder. There's no bebop, there's no rocksteady, there's no Krang. But this is leading me into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, released in 2016, the sequel to this film. So I do believe that this is for me to go through the
Yes.
Am I to go through the key facts? I am indeed.
Correct.
Sorry, I didn't want to step on your toes again. You scare me slightly. I'll be honest. So yeah, it was released on the 3rd of June 2016. As we say, we couldn't really track the exact budget of the first film, but this film, everywhere we looked, did give an exact budget of $135 million. So, they didn't skimp on it, and for all we know, it could have been the same as the first film. The box office, it took 245.6 million, so it was down on the 2014 film, but I don't think that's too shabby. Same producers. Michael Bay is the main producer. There's umpteen producers on this film, but it is widely known as the Michael Bay Turtles. It's a Michael Bay film. Director Dave Green, previous work on a movie called Echo to Echo, which is a sci-fi film. Again, same ILM, doing the special effects, still distributed by Paramount, so not a lot's really changed in that respect. But yeah, this film, I believe, gave the fans nearly everything they wanted but they didn't do it particularly well in some instances. We got Bebop and Rocksteady. We got Casey Jones. We got Krang. We finally got a Technodrome. Finally, after all these years, we got the bloody Technodrome, which, for me growing up, the Technodrome was amazing. We got that. Do you want to give a brief rundown of the plot of the film, Kim?
Yeah, so the Turtles continue to live in the shadows, and no one knows they were the ones who took down the Shredder. April O'Neil does some snooping and learns a scientist named Baxter Stockman is working for Shredder. He plans to break him out while he's being transported. April tells the Turtles, who try and stop it, but they can't. Shredder ends up being teleported to another dimension where he meets Krang, who instructs him to assemble the Technodrome. But can the four ninjas stop them in time?
So that is the basic plot of the film. The Shredder is the film starts off. The Shredder, different guy playing him. We didn't go into the actors, but it's a different guy. But this time around, you actually see the Shredder's face. He's out of his mask. He is being transported to a high security prison. There are two guys in with him called Bebop and Rocksteady. We all know Bebop and Rocksteady are.
I think I think also Casey Jones comes into this because Casey Jones is one of the guys also transporting him.
Indeed, he does. Casey Jones is transporting the prison thing. It is worth noting that Sheamus from WWE plays Rocksteady. A guy called Gary Anthony Williams plays Bebop. And yeah, they are in it, and they basically the Foot hatch this elaborate plan to rescue the Shredder. The Shredder is intercepted by Krang. That's a magazine by Krang, sorry. Is intercepted by Krang. He teleports him, tells Shredder, I need you to find these 3 pieces to build this machine so that we can get the Technodrome, my ultimate war machine. I want you to help me serve side by side with me. We also finally get Baxter Stockman in this film. Sadly, no references to him being mutating into the Fly character he did in the Fred Wolf cartoon. So Shredder obviously uses Baxter Stockman as a pawn in this game. The Shredder escapes. Bebop and Rocksteady escape. Casey Jones gets blamed by the chief of police for it. Casey Jones is a policeman working in the New York Police Department. He wants to be a detective, wants to get his badge. He's basically told that's not going to happen because you effed up so badly. He then decides to go out and hunt down Bebop and Rocksteady and the Shredder himself. There's a massive hunt for these 3 pieces. The Turtles finally fight Bebop and Rocksteady on a plane that's crashing. That is a cool fight. I loved that. Bebop and Rocksteady are big. Shockingly, when they turn into Bebop and Rocksteady, they decide to be very happy and look down their trousers at what they've been endowed with, which seemed a bit odd in a kid's film. Although, do you remember that scene, Kim?
Yeah,
they look down their trousers. My man.
I don't really know why that was put into the movie.
Yeah, it was that was like, I was like, what's that about? Will Arnett's back in it as the Falcon because he's taken the credit for everything the Turtles achieved in the first film. Because obviously, the Turtles do save the day. They do stop the virus spreading in the first film. Raphael has a moment of clarity, so we didn't say that, but it's obvious the Turtles weren't going to lose.
Good for Raphael.
Good old Raphael. He's still a dick in this film. And yeah, they go on this big hunt, and basically Shredder gets these parts for Baxter Stockman, betrays Baxter Stockman. They start teleporting the Technodrome through from Dimension X. Shredder gets teleported onto the then assembling Technodrome. Rather than using the Shredder, who in this film has got he's not in a Swiss Army knife Transformer suit in this film. He doesn't look like the Shredder, we know, but he looks more like the Shredder. Krang, basically, you don't get to see Shredder fight in it. Krang freezes him and puts him in a lockup. The Turtles go on to the Technodrome, which doesn't fully assemble. They manage to beat Krang. It gets sucked away back to Dimension X. They save the day. That is the film. There's not a lot more I can say on the story. There is a lot more I can say on the story, but that, without spending too long on it, I think this film, it did have some funny parts in it, but I think given that this was the first time we had Baxter Stockman, we had Krang, we had Bebop, we had Rocksteady, to repeat myself, I just think it under-delivered and underused those characters.
Yeah. I feel like they tried to pack too much into... Although the film is long enough, like, they had too many characters that had backstories and stuff that they should have gone into, but they didn't have enough time to do it.
Because Casey Jones only at one point in the film ever wears a hockey mask.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And it's just, and he, you know, characters change and that, but, you know, I've always known Casey Jones as hockey mask wearing with his bag of broken up bats and his hockey stick and whatnot. And, you know, he does use a hockey stick in the film. He's the guy who has sort of the final fight with Bebop and Rocksteady. He's skating around with, they're on motorbikes, aren't they, if I recall, driving around a warehouse. Megan Fox and Will Arnett's character, Vern, they have a fight with like Shredder's second in command. Oh, I don't know if that's his daughter, his love interest, or just a woman serving with him. You don't really get told. They're the ones who fight her, even though she's massively more skilled than them. But, you know, obviously, good always beats the bad.
There was one funny bit though. There's that bit where they're but when they're coming off the plane and then Raphael ends up in the water and then he finally gets to dry land and he's like kissing the rock for dry land and then he looks up and he comes face to face with a tortoise.
Yeah,
he's like, this is awkward.
But funnily enough, when I watched that, I knew that would be a part you would like. As weird as that is, like, I bet Kim thinks that's hilarious.
Because it is funny.
But Baxter Stockman's a real letdown in this film. I mean, look, they did everything they did in this film. They just as well have thrown the kitchen sink in and turned him into a fly. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. They could have done. Mm-hmm. They just as well have done. It, to me, it's like you squeeze that much in. What's one more bit of fan service? Bebop and Rocksteady. I didn't find, maybe I'm getting older, but I didn't think they were obviously tried to make them comical, but I don't think they were very comical.
No, they just reminded me of Mr. T the whole time.
Yeah.
That's all. That's literally, like, they didn't remind me of individual characters. I literally sat there being like, why are you mimicking Mr. T?
I think they absolutely failed in not letting the Shredder this time round have another fight with the Turtles, but without all the tech stuff. I think it would have been amazing to see that.
Just back to basics, yeah.
I mean, we didn't really cover Splinter in the last film, but, you know, Splinter, he hasn't changed from the first film to this film. Splinter's just overly skilled in this film. In both these films, Splinter can just... I know we said in the 90s films, but he's overly skilled. Well, I know, to say he's not overly skilled. He's just a lot more violent, shall we say.
He just seems aggressive. He doesn't seem like a sensei who's in one with himself.
Yeah. So to say he's overly skilled that's wrong of me to say. He's just overly violent.
Yeah, he's just aggressive.
It's almost like Splinter in these films. He's almost like he wants the fight rather than like, calm my sons. Don't go for the fight. He's like, I'll F him up for you. Let me get in there. Tag me in. I think Krang sounded like absolute ass in this film. I hated his voice.
If I'm really honest, I actually fell asleep during this film.
But I hope you fired this film, you know,
I did,
research.
I did finish the film, but I did fall asleep, not realizing I'd fallen asleep, and then I had to rewind, and then I was like, where did I get to? So I mean, I did rewatch bits, but I did fall asleep.
I do think that the Technodrome is very Transformers-esque again, with the whole assembling of it, bits through the city. Well, I mean, it's a Michael Bay film. It goes without saying, but it is just very much. It is just very much Michael Bay film. Transformery. This is Transformers, but with the turtles. The first film, I thought that. This film, more so.
100%, yeah. It was.
This film is going for it. In fact, if they hadn't decided, and this is probably completely wrong, people go, no, that's not what they were doing. But in my head, if they hadn't decided in the first film that they wanted to do a crossover with Transformers, I think this film, unless Michael Bay categorically comes out and goes, no, that's not my plan, to me, I'm convinced this film was really aiming for the shared universe with Transformers. As you say, the cameo with Bumblebee in it, albeit a guy dressed up as one of those like Halloween suits you told me where he transformed, because I missed this twice. But this shows you how my attention probably wasn't drawn as much as it should be. Other notable things, Johnny Knoxville wasn't asked back to voice Leonardo this time. So,
no.
Not that I even... Did you notice that? Did you notice the difference in voice acting there?
Slightly, but do you know what? I think I wasn't invested in the characters in the same way, because I just look at them and they're CGI. So I sometimes struggle with CGI as characters. I feel like I can't always connect with the character.
I mean, I still think, as we said in the previous film, I don't think the CGI was bad by an extent, and I had no trouble watching it. Like, it's not like watching an early Spawn film where you're like, Jesus Christ, what is that? The CGI didn't bother me in this, but for me, it's not because they were CGI characters I didn't relate to them. I still think practical effects will always win for me. Maybe that's just my age. Maybe that's what I grew up with. I don't want to tarnish CGI. I think it has its uses.
I'm biased because I worked in the other side of it. So
yeah, you're a practical effects girl. That's your thing, isn't it?
Biased.
That's fair, but you know what you know, don't you? You're always going to steer towards what you know. Yeah, this film is. It didn't overpromise because it gave you everything it said, but it did underdeliver. I've already said that. I don't know there's not a lot more to say to it. We've briefly covered the plot, and that is the film. And again, my biggest disappointments in this film: no Shredder fighting the Turtles in a less tech suit, no Baxter Stockman as a fly, but massive win on the fight in the plane. That fight on the plane with the Turtles and Bebop and Rocksteady, amazing.
Yeah.
And Krang, he wasn't the Krang suit. A lot of people slated it when I was doing my. I don't think the Krang suit was actually terrible. I don't think Krang was a terrible design. Just didn't like his voice. But then that is probably a lot of bias in me there from childhood with the Fred Wolf Krang, because that's the voice I knew.
Yeah.
So anything that didn't resemble that was probably always going to throw me a bit.
Yeah.
So would you say we've covered what there needs to be covered on that film?
Yeah, I think so.
So those are the 5 films. As we say, we couldn't go over every detail, every actor, every little production note. There just wouldn't have been time. We're an hour and a half into this now, and we've literally scratched the surface. I think me and Kim have both said we wouldn't mind revisiting some Turtle stuff again in the future.
After a well-needed break.
After a well-needed break. But it is probably worth saying now that we need to make a decision on what our favourite films are. We haven't pre-discussed this. So, and I'm going to make this a bit fairer. Pick your favourite film of all of them, and then if you want, you can say, well, what your favourite Michael Bay one was. Just because I think I know where this is going. I think I know where this is going for both of us. But Kim, what's your favourite film of all of them? Heyday versus Bayday. Who won? Heyday or Bayday?
For me, it's gonna be Heyday, the original.
1990 Turtles.
Yeah.
Okay. And if we separate the films, your favourite one out of the Bay films, just to give it a little bit of a chance, hasn't won overall.
Probably the first one.
Yep. Exactly the same here for me. 1990s Turtles, hands down.
It's like the first time ever.
Did we just agree on something?
Yeah, oh my God, we did actually just agree on something.
See, me and Kim have been friends for a long time, and I don't know why we're friends, because we just argue all the time. spent most of my life getting told off by her and being told to be an adult and grow up. And
I feel like something has shifted in our friendship if we've actually agreed.
We have agreed on something. Wow. So yeah, for me, it's Heyday. Sorry, Michael Bay, but I will say that the first film was the better of the two, but the best scene out of the two of your films for me was the fight on the plane. So Heyday wins out. So that brings us to the end of the main podcast. And Kim, where could the lovely people find you if they wanted to look you up?
Best place to find me is on Instagram under KymGonic. Please don't feel the need to follow me. I'm not one of those people where I'm like, yeah, follow me because I want loads of people. I'm not one of those. If you want to, go for your life. But if not, that's cool.
Before I say where I can be found, I just want to say massive thanks to everyone who helped us with this. Chris Smith, Smith Lord, providing all the artwork for our thumbnails and everything. We're going to wrap the main podcast up now, but right after this segment finishes, we're going to stick around. And if anyone wants to chat to us or say hello or whatever, you can. Thank you so much for coming along and listening. I'm going to wrap this part up.
And before Nick forgets, where can they find you?
Oh yes, thank you. See, this is why we need Kim. This is why I had to bring a code. Well, Action Pop Dad, you can find me on YouTube. You can find me every time I do anything, I forget to say where I can be found. You can find me on YouTube, Action Pop Dad. You can find me on Instagram, Action Pop Dad. You can find me occasionally being sarcastic on Twitter and getting blocked by people as Action Pop Dad. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Kim, thank you so much for all your help on all this.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you on the next one. Take it easy.